Sri Lanka is a short boat ride from India, and although a lot of its culture is influenced by India, it is remarkably distinct too. Legend says an Indian chieftain, Vijaya Singha, landed in Sri Lanka with 700 men around the time of Buddha. The island was then inhabited by Yakshas, Nagas, Devas, and Rakshasas. In other words, forest dwellers, snake worshippers, fishermen, and other tribes. Vijaya united the four clans, and they became the Sinhala people. Vijaya's title, Singha, means lion. His grandfather is supposed to have been a lion. Let's say he was as brave as a lion, and the legacy continued. The Sri Lankan flag has the lion and the four people leaves, representing the four clans. The island had several names in the past. Vijaya saw his men had red palms as they worked the red soil. He called the island Tambapani, meaning copper red hands. In the Indian epic Ramayana, Sri Lanka is Ravana's kingdom, Lanka. In Tamil, the name is Elam. Bengali literature refers to it as Shinghol, from Vijaya Singha's title. His grandmother was a Bengali princess. In Persia and Arabia, the island was called Serendip, meaning Silk Island, since it was on the maritime Silk Road. The word serendipity comes from stories set on this island. The European colonists called it variants of Ceylon, which is best known now in the Ceylon tea brand. In 1972, the name officially changed from Ceylon to Sri Lanka. While traveling in Sri Lanka, you come across many stupas. These bell-shaped mounds are Buddhist shrines and often contain relics of Buddha or of a monk or nun. You also see giant Buddha statues dotting the landscape. When Buddhism was spreading out of India, it came to Sri Lanka in the first wave. Now, 70% of the population is Buddhist, 13% Hindu, 10% Muslim, 7% Christian. Around 250 BCE, Ashoka, the great king who unified India, became a Buddhist. He dug up the mortal remains of the Buddha and distributed it in hundreds of stupas. He erected stone pillars alongside, topped by the Dharma Chakra, the wheel of righteousness. Some of Buddha's teachings were also inscribed on the pillars. Then he sent out Buddhist missions to neighboring kingdoms. To Sri Lanka he sent his son, Mahinda. The Sri Lankan king welcomed him, adopted Buddhism, and made a monastery near his capital, Anuradhapura. 2 years later, Ashoka's daughter, Sanghamitta, came to Sri Lanka with a precious gift. This was a sapling from the tree under which Buddha sat to meditate. The peepal tree has ever since been called the Bodhi tree. The stupa and tree are worshipped as representations of the Buddha. Later, Sri Lanka got another precious gift. An Indian princess is said to have hidden one of Buddha's teeth in her hair and smuggled it out of India. The tooth relic is now in Kandy. It is a pilgrim spot for Buddhists the world over. Throughout Sri Lankan medieval history, South Indian kings usurped the island. They brought state patronage of Hinduism. Tamil people sailed from India and settled in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan king would go into hiding, build up an army, and then conquer back his land. This is what happened to King Valagamba of Anuradhapura in the 1st century BCE. When exiled, he stayed in a monastery in Dambulla. It was a complex of 80 caves on a rock 150 meters high. 15 years later, he regained his kingdom. To show his gratitude, he decorated a cave with paintings and statues. Later kings decorated more caves, gilded several statues, and touched up the paintings. Now there are 5 such magnificently embellished caves. The first cave has a Buddha in parinirvana, that is 14 meters long. His disciple Ananda stands at his feet. Lord Vishnu is at his head. Buddhists in Sri Lanka worship Vishnu alongside Buddha. There is a small Vishnu temple next to this cave. The second cave is the largest, with 56 statues of Buddha holding various mudras. There is a stupa inside the cave and statues of 2 patron kings. Dipavamsa and Mahavamsa are early Buddhist texts that speak of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. They say, much before Buddha was born, Lord of Heaven, Shakra, requested Lord Vishnu to take care of Sri Lanka because later it would preserve the Buddha's Dhamma. The Dambulla caves are inside an overhanging rock with drip ledge. This keeps the caves dry even during monsoons. But the largest cave has a natural crack through which water drips year-round. This water is collected in an urn and used in rituals. The monastery is an active temple. It is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The 3 jewels of Buddhism are Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dhammam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the teaching, I take refuge in the community. After Buddha's passing, practicing the first jewel became problematic. His presence was created through his statues, the stupas that held relics, the Bodhi tree, plus stories of his visitations. There is a steep mountain in Sri Lanka called Sripada. On the summit is a giant footprint-like formation. Buddhists say it is Buddha's footprint when he was visiting Sri Lanka. Hindus say it is Shiva's. Christians and Muslims say Adam landed there when he was exiled from paradise. In fact, Sripada is also called Adam's Peak. Buddha's footprints are there in Burma and Thailand too. Mahayana Buddhism, which came later than the older Theravada, solved the problem by stating that Buddha was never born and never died. He is perpetually incarnated in the Bodhisattvas. The Jataka tales recount his past lives. At the foot of the Dambulla rock is the Golden Temple. This temple, constructed in 2001, has a golden stupa, golden Bodhi tree base, and a gigantic golden Buddha. The statue is 30 meters tall and has the Dharma Chakra Mudra.
Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Sangham
A short distance from Dambulla in central Sri Lanka is a fortress built on top of a rock. It is called Sigiriya, which means fortress in the sky. It was built by King Kashyapa, who reigned from 477 CE. Since he was not the rightful heir to the Anuradhapura throne, he moved his palace to Sigiriya and built it on a 200-meter vertical rock. He also built the city around it, which is one of the best examples of ancient urban planning. There are many gardens leading up to the rock. These are of three categories: terraced gardens, boulder gardens which have caves for monks, and water gardens with tanks that are connected to the external moat. Sri Lanka was very advanced in water technologies. Sigiriya is best known for its frescoes. These could be apsaras or court ladies. Their painting style is unique. Some have called it the golden age of Sri Lankan art. It is believed there were about 500 portraits, but now only a dozen or so survive. They are on the granite surface halfway up the rock. Facing them is a long wall polished by white plaster. It is called mirror wall because at some point in time the reflection of the paintings could be seen on its surface. For 1,000 years, hundreds of comments were scribbled on it by visitors to the frescoes. On the same level is the Lion's Gate. The paws are intact, but the mouth has collapsed. An exposed staircase leads to the top. The foundation of the fortress indicates it was a grand construction. Here is the throne with the view of the forests, the bathing pool, a raised platform where stood a stupa, lily ponds, and the guard's post. King Kashyapa was afraid that some day the rightful heir would turn up with an army, and so he did in the year 495 CE. There was a grand battle in which Kashyapa died. Sigiriya was abandoned by the royalty, but the monks used it as a monastery for 900 years. It was then forgotten for several centuries. When it was rediscovered in the 1890s, the forest had to be cut back before archaeologists could begin their work. Now, Sigiriya is a well-visited UNESCO World Heritage Site. In Colombo, the town hall, churches, parks, arcades show signs of European architecture. The west coast of Sri Lanka was a Portuguese colony from the early 1500s. After 150 years, the Dutch removed the Portuguese and began ruling Sri Lanka. In 1815, they were conquered by the British, who by then had the whole of the Indian subcontinent. But throughout these centuries, Sri Lankan kings and statesmen never gave up trying to regain control of their island. Finally, in 1948, Sri Lanka gained independence, at the same time as other Asian nations. This is Independence Square in Colombo, the current capital. Its walls have relief panels of Sri Lankan history. The Colombo National Museum has Hindu and Buddhist art, hand-woven textiles, ivory carvings, masks used in performances, and so on. But there is another place with as much art as the museum. It is the Gangaramaya Temple. The temple was established in 1885 during the colonial era. It became a symbol of Buddhist revivalism. Even today, the temple has social development projects such as publication of Buddhist literature, rural temple construction, orphanages, old age homes, and so on. During a bad drought in the 1st century BCE, when a lot of monks were dying, there was a concern that the oral tradition may get lost. The elders sat in a council and wrote down the teachings on palm leaves. These manuscripts then traveled to India, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, China, Korea. In return, these countries offered gifts to Sri Lanka, which are kept in the Gangaramaya temple. This white jade Buddha statue with dragon columns was donated by China. These are Shiva and Devi sculptures from India. Here is Radha and Krishna and the elephant god Ganesha in ivory. These are Thai Buddhas. A replica of the famous Emerald Buddha of Bangkok was donated too. It sits in the sister temple called Sima Malaka. This temple is on the Beira Lake. Sima Malaka means Assembly of the Monks. The Gangaramaya temple hosts an elephant parade. Here is a taxidermied elephant. Its foot, tail, and molar teeth. The wall across the street has some beautiful murals.
Om Mani Padme Hum Mahajnana Chittodvada Chittasyana Vitarika Sarvarthapura Om Mani Padme Hum Mahajnana Chittodvada Chittasyana Vitarika Sarvarthapara
The two primary languages of Sri Lanka are Sinhala and Tamil. Tamil is the language of the people living in the part of India that is closest to Sri Lanka. Communal tensions between these two groups started towards the end of the British rule. One must note, communal tensions in Sri Lanka were on lines of language, not religion, as it was in India, where tensions between Hindus and Muslims led to the partition, and thus the creation of Pakistan from India. In 1971, when Pakistan was further partitioned into Bangladesh and Pakistan, it was then for language, Bengali and Urdu. When the first Prime Minister of independent Sri Lanka made Sinhala the sole national language, mass Tamil agitation began. The ruling was reversed, but the situation gradually escalated to an armed conflict. Starting from early 1980s, for almost 3 decades, the country suffered the bloodiest civil war in human history. Finally, in 2009, the war ended after the Tamil leaders were killed and their weapons were captured. Then came years of reconciliation commissions, integration of Tamils, and affirmative action. Now there is peace and prosperity. Let Vishnu preserve Buddha's message of non-violence in beautiful Sri Lanka.